I think in any economy, human capital is the key driving force. And it's not just in GDP per capita or income, but it's in quality of life. So I think it's very important to anticipate that the role of the government is going to have to expand, and it's going to have to protect us from the misuse of these new technologies.
Hola a todos, un gusto saludarlos. César Pabón, director ejecutivo de investigaciones económicas de Corfi colombiana. El día de hoy tenemos el gusto de tener al profesor Paul Romer. Buenos días, profesor Paul Romer.
Glad to be here.
Es profesor del Boston College, también es director de su Centro para la Economía de las Ideas. También, como muchos lo conocen, en 2018 fue galardonado con el Premio Nobel de Economía por su trabajo innovador llamado Economía de las Ideas, que ha transformado nuestra forma de entender el crecimiento económico al poner el foco en el conocimiento y las ideas como motores claves del desarrollo, más allá de los bienes físicos limitados. En su trayectoria, también el profesor Romer ocupó el puesto de economista jefe del Banco Mundial, donde impulsó el fortalecimiento de la función de investigación y además mejoró la eficiencia del Centro de Investigación del Banco Mundial. Además, fundó el Instituto Marron de Gestión Urbana en el NYU, que trabaja para ayudar a las ciudades y a planear un mejor futuro a través de políticas públicas. Professor Paul, it has been a great pleasure, great privilege to have you here in Cartagena, in la Convención Bancaria. Once again, you are visiting Colombia. And I would like to begin this discussion asking you the question that all economists must do or have done to yourself. How do you see the role of human capital and education in driving productivity growth, particularly in emerging economies such as Colombia?
I think in any economy, human capital is the key driving force. And it's not just in GDP per capita or income, but it's in quality of life. Now, when I say human capital, I mean this in a very broad sense. So acquiring human capital includes learning how to know what your values are, to know what to work for, to give meaning to your life. So it's a very broad term. It could also be something as specific as how to write HTML for a web page, but the most important parts of human capital are things like the values that we internalize based on our beliefs and the beliefs of people around us. And I think satisfaction increasingly is something that people feel when they are not just skilled, they know how to write a web page, but they have values that guide them to use those skills in a way that they feel is socially beneficial.
For sure, and I know that this notion of productivity is the main driver of change and development of countries. But I would like to focus in Colombia. Like given the current challenges in Colombia, we just discussed in the panel all the challenges that we have. Colombia productivity the last 10 years has been stagnated, and we don't have like any important effort or the important figure in terms of productivity. What do you think will be the top priorities for policymakers to stimulate productivity? How can you enhance this productivity and education movement?
We know the kinds of changes that can lead to faster productivity growth. Almost all of them require giving up something today. Like you give up some consumption today, you give up some free time today, and in exchange you get some benefit in the future. It's hard in a society to organize everybody's efforts and attention in a way where they give things up now and get some benefit in the future. So it isn't just a question of identifying, well, what could we do in principle? It's like understanding what could we get motivated to do and agree on doing together. And so in my talk today, I was trying to think about new directions we could use to try and think about committing across the usual partisan divides, committing to something that would really benefit future generations and benefit the country.
Maybe we also know that you have visited Colombia several times. I think it has been connected with this agenda, long-term agenda, in particular in terms of cities. What have you done here, and what is your analysis behind these polls that have been produced before?
The project I worked on was called the Urbanization Project, and we were trying to encourage the development of well-functioning urban areas in the developing world. Let me explain why that became a focus for me. The modern sector, a place where somebody gets paid a salary, works in a firm that has an HR department and an IT department, lives in an environment where you can trade with many other firms. That modern economy is where almost all the value in an economy is produced these days. And it's the place where the opportunities for acquiring new skills are most significant. So we need to think of people as acquiring skills on the job in the places where they live, not just getting them in school and then stopping to learn. So I wanted for Colombia to have new urban areas where new people could move and get jobs, and new firms could come in and offer the opportunities, not just to work, but to learn about the modern economy. So I think effective urbanization is a very good way to provide good jobs, where what I mean by a good job is it's a job that helps you acquire skills that will make you a better worker in the future. Now, urbanization depends very much on government as the first mover. The government has to have some kind of a plan for the public space, the arterial roads that the buses will go down, where the sewer pipes will be laid, and so forth. You need a plan for the grid of public space. Then the private sector could come in and develop the other parts. And it's very difficult to get governments to think ahead about taking these actions that will lead to good, successful urbanization in the future. We had two projects here. We started with several cities, but eventually concentrated on Monteria and Valledupar. I just had a conversation today with the former mayor of Monteria, who said that those planning activities that we started 10 years ago have really paid off in Monteria. So I'm very eager to come back to Colombia and see how that played out in Monteria. But the test will be not just, does it look good to an architect, or would somebody in an architecture museum or magazine, would they want to take pictures of it? That's not the way to judge it. The way to judge it would be to see, are there new people who've moved in there, often from rural areas, who got their first job in a city and who have been able to build families and get on the ladder of economic success? I bet that there are, and that was the whole point behind the urbanization project.
So you already did this, and you were helping Monteria and Valledupar in this.
That started 10 years ago.
10 years ago. And nowadays, today, you mentioned also a very interesting policy recommendation that was the civil service. Like, how can you connect with the previous recommendation, but why did you mention that as one of the main recommendations nowadays?
Let me just stay with urbanization for a second. Part of what I do is I get people to try and at least think about possibilities they don't think about on a day-to-day basis. And so, one of the kinds of things I would say to the people of Colombia is, there's a lot of very talented people who would love to go someplace safe and get a job in a city. Why don't you build like a Hong Kong? Hong Kong accepted millions of people from mainland China. Why don't you build a Hong Kong for Latin America and let everybody, even if they're poor, come here, get started? Even if they come here as very poor people, if they're willing to work hard, they can benefit, you can benefit. Nobody will take me seriously, but we should at least think about it. In a way, this was actually the philosophy of New York City. When New York City built its grid in 1811, they had 1 million immigrants who came to New York City and got jobs in things like the sweatshop industry. And it took 100 years, but New York has become, I think, the best city in the world because of that initiative. So more things are possible than people realize. The talk today was not about, say, a Hong Kong. And by the way, if you did it like Hong Kong, you wouldn't be saying like immigrants could go throughout all of Colombia. You just have a special zone that they could come into, and they'd be happy to be there, and it could be good for people in Colombia too. So what else could we do that could be a win-win for everyone? I think that the government has sometimes provided very good opportunities for young people to grow into successful adults. The military in Israel has a unit that develops cyber security, which has trained a huge fraction of the people who started IT firms in Israel. So you can learn important skills in a government organization. The Civilian Conservation Corps during the 1930s in the United States gave young people who were unemployed and lost their direction a place where they could live and get fed and do some work, often like things like clearing forests. Those were very basic things that they were helping young people with, but it was important at a time when there weren't market jobs that were available. I was suggesting, well, what about creating a sort of a modern, digital conservation corps for Colombia, where young people in Colombia are expected to serve a certain amount of time, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and this kind of corps could take on social problems that everybody agrees would be good to solve. I suggest that you could use it to do better enforcement of traffic, so you get better traffic compliance and more effective cities. You could use it to decide to identify the cadasters, so you have a much more effective market for land. You could take on all kinds of challenges. And along the way, you could actually enforce certain kinds of skills the way a military organization does with young people. Like, you have to exercise. You have to make your bed even sometimes in the military. You have to show up on time. You have to get along with your peers. You have to follow orders. These are things which can end up being very valuable in adult life, but that many young people haven't had a chance to experience yet. It wouldn't be for everybody. There'd have to be some other options. But my hope is that it might be the kind of thing that the country could agree on, even factions from all ends of the political spectrum, and to create a different kind of environment beyond just the schools, where people were doing real work that they believed in and learning as they did that work.
So you have mentioned I work in cities, also recommendation in terms of civil service. And looking forward, I don't know, you mentioned at the beginning, the most important thing about productivity is long term.
Yeah.
Looking forward, what do you think are the main challenges? I know you have been working in artificial intelligence. How do you see Colombia can be taking advantage of these new waves of productivity and artificial intelligence, that it's for sure going to be the most important bets in terms of productivity in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, unfortunately, one of the things that we're seeing as a pattern is that new technologies are creating opportunities for predators, people who want to take advantage of other people. Think about cybercrime. All kinds of cybercrime. Now we all get this spam and misleading links and potential infections, and so the new opportunities from technology have been exploited more rapidly, often by bad actors. I'm also very concerned about the way that some of these new military technologies, like drones, like the first-person drones that can deliver explosive charges, these could easily be, they're already being mobilized by criminal gangs. So we need, as a society, if we want to get the benefits of all these new technologies, we also have to put in place mechanisms that can stop the harmful uses of these. So I think we need to have careful regulation of drones and who uses drones, licensing, tracking. Drones are a very, potentially dangerous tool to just let anybody run without being accountable for what they do with the drone. I also think it's a shame for people like, my mother, who's now no longer alive, but when she was alive, she would get all this spam and all this stuff. She wouldn't know what to click on. She'd get some message that she, owed money because of some, bill she hadn't paid, which is a complete lie. But she would just naively think it was true and click on it. And we shouldn't let everybody be subject to that kind of predatory behavior. Another point I made was that if you're trying to stop bad behavior, you don't have to lock people up for 40 years or something. Even just small sanctions, as long as you catch it right away, will be enough to get everybody to give up on doing that kind of thing. So I think it's very important to anticipate that the role of the government is going to have to expand, and it's going to have to protect us from the misuse of these new technologies. And that's going to require highly skilled young people who are willing to work in the government. And that's part of what I think this new kind of tech digital core could be used for.
And this may be our last question because the time is over, but I was going to focus in the last comment that you made. This sounds to be like a very, not pessimistic, but sort of challenging future that you are looking in the next 10 to 20 years. But here we are part of Corfi Colombiana. Corfi Colombiana is a company that is based mainly in Colombia. We have investments in agriculture, in infrastructure, tourism, and also a lot of people that follow us are companies of different sectors of Colombia. What will be your message in these challenges ahead, not just locally, also globally? We're in a very uncertain context.
Yeah.
What will be the recommendation you will give to the private sector, to the companies, the citizens that follow us?
So let me describe a conversation I had with somebody who was very high up in an oil company. They were doing fracking in the United States, and we were talking about how the bad operators in fracking, the ones who didn't line their wells, didn't cap them when they were done, were the ones who were creating big problems. And it was actually kind of turning public opinion against the whole technology, where that technology had the potential to help us uncover assets that we couldn't get to before. So I said, we really need regulation to protect the good operators like you, and keep the bad actors from destroying all the benefits we could get from that. And this executive said, you're exactly right. And then I asked him, well, would you ever be willing to go out and say in public that we should have more regulation? And he turned a little bit white, his eyes got wide, and he was like, oh, I could never say that. And that's just intellectual cowardice. You've got to recognize that there's bad regulation, but there's good regulation. And there's going to be so many possibilities with many of these technologies. If we don't have the good regulation, the whole domain is going to get poisoned. So we've got to work towards good regulation. Think about agriculture. There'll be all kinds of uses for drones in agriculture. But if people are also using drones to drop little hand grenades and extort, money from people, we're going to ban drones completely. So if you want to be able to use drones in agriculture, you better get behind some system for licensing of drones and tracking who's got what and what they're doing with them, because otherwise we're just going to shut it down. People aren't going to be willing to live with that kind of daily threat. So the challenge in all of these technological domains is how to get the benefits that technology offer without the downsides. And the government is the best vehicle we've got for doing that.
So, Professor Romer, it has been a great privilege to have you here. And for me also as an economist, for sure it has been a Nobel Prize visiting Colombia. And we hope you can come back once again in the following years. And let's see how this big question about productivity has evolved. And hopefully we'll have good news the next time you will come. As already today, the mayor of Monteria have already announced that the thing you promoted 10 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, I'm eager to come back and visit Monterrey and si vaya du parto. So I'll be back.
We'll be more than happy to have you here once again in Colombia, and thank you so much for this interview.
Look forward to it.